Hi, welcome to Metro by T-Mobile.
Hi, my dad is in serious need of an upgrade.
Yeah, my phone's a fossil.
He needs a new phone and a new network stat.
Well, when he switches to Metro, he can get an amazing iPhone 7 with HD Retina display for just $99.99 after ID validation.
Wow, $99.99?
Bye-bye, fossil.
Requires porting of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. With validation of ID. An independent database limit for per account/household. 32 gigabyte model only. See store for details and terms and conditions.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Herb Smith. I actually listened to him close to maybe 10 years ago on a show that I used to be on and listen to religiously, which was the Visigoth show with Keith Hansen, who is, I think the show is pretty much defunct. The shows are still available online. It was really one of the first early podcasts. But tonight we're going to talk, I think, about an important subject that's still relevant, which is about the trafficking network that was centered in Mena, Arkansas. And so we're going to go into detail. We've decided to break it into 2 hours, so this will be the first hour. And there's so much information there. So Herb Smith, are you there?
Yes, I am. Nice
Awesome.
to meet you, William.
Nice to be with you as well. So as a listener to your shows, you've talked about 9/11 as well. So I recollect you talking about that and me listening to those. So yeah, I'm delighted that you agreed to the interview. So for people who don't know your background, can you talk a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in the subject of Mena, Arkansas?
Yeah, to just give you about myself, I'm 57 years old. I'm a retired postal worker, so I'm part of the system too. So when we talk about the Iran-Contra affair and Mena, I was in my 20s during the Iran-Contra affair, so that I remember some of these things. But what really kind of woke me up was 9/11. But going into 9/11, I think I was a Republican way back, and when the 2000 election came around, I wasn't crazy about Bush Jr. I didn't know I was actually thinking about voting for Gore and all that. And so when the hanging Chads thing came up, that started, it kind of stunk to me. Even that, at that time, it just, something didn't seem right to me. And I'd voted for Bush Sr. twice, but the hanging Chads, just the whole way that went down, started kind of reawakening my interest in what was going on. And then 9/11 happened. I believed it. But when you got into the second Gulf War, then I really started thinking, what's going on here? Like you had Bush Sr. in Iraq, and now you got Bush Jr. in Iraq. Like that was really getting me going. And then in like 2004, I stumbled upon a video called the Pentagon Strikes video. Did you ever hear of that?
Yes, I think I watched that like 3 times. Yeah, I watched pretty much every 9/11 video 3 or 4 times. So
okay,
the well-known one. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what really got me thinking. So it never even dawned on me that the official theory could be false. But so I saw that, and then I realized I was like, we never did see any video of that plane hitting the Pentagon. And then what got me too was how they said they knew right where to go to confiscate any video that would take any video of the Pentagon being struck. So I went on for kind of about a couple months. I started looking into it, and in the end, I kind of got confused after a while. It was all new to me, and so I gave it up for a little while. And a couple months later, I got into it again, and then I got it. And I think when I don't know, you probably at one point it was what got me, not only the Pentagon, but how they didn't intercept the plane. And I didn't realize that standard operating procedure should have been to intercept the plane. And then Bush's behavior in the classroom. So, and then when I really got it was when I found a site called 9/11 Blimp. Have you ever heard Dave on Business Show at all?
It sounds familiar, yes. I feel like
so
I recollect that.
Yeah, he's like a physics major, real smart guy. So when he explained how when you realize the towers didn't just fall or collapse, but they were destroyed, well, that energy had to come from somewhere, and it was just a massive energy deficit. The buildings can't go straight through themselves at that kind of speed, because that's taking away from if at all, that's taking away from the gravitational potential energy. And when I got that, then I knew for sure it was fake. And then I learned about Building 7. And so when I got it, one of the first things I did was I wrote a letter to my paper was the Utica OD, Utica Observer Dispatch. So it was the first letter I'd ever written. And it was kind of a tepid letter, as far as one guy had talked about an insurance, Elliot, talking to Elliot Spitzer about, like, there was an insurance claim. It had something to do with insurance, and I can't even remember what it was. But I wrote this letter to the local paper, and the next morning, like, I got 2 calls on it. And one guy was like, told me about a book, Barbarians in the Gates by Colonel Dom de Grand Prix.
Yeah, I recollect that book.
Right. So this guy was telling me about Joseph McCarthy was right, blah, blah, blah. The other phone call I got was by an older lady, and she wanted to meet me, and it turned out like she was actually like a communist back in the day. Okay. So I don't know what about my letter that actually spurred her on, but it was kind of weird. So I went and met, I didn't agree with that, but it was kind of like, I felt like I was kind of underground, and that was new for me. And so I wrote more letters, did presentations, and then my friend Andy Sr., who's the other half of the Uticans, like, he's a great writer, and he had been studying, we go back to high school, and he had been studying 9/11 too. And the time it happened, his wife told him the day it happened, said Bush did it. Now, in the beginning, it didn't take me long to realize it just wasn't a Bush thing. But at first I kind of thought it was, but it didn't take me long to get past the right-left paradigm. But so he said, why don't we start a blog page and we'll call it Uticans for 9/11 Truth. And I wasn't really crazy about 9/11 Truth. I don't like to always use the same terminology everyone else does, but I agreed to it. I said, okay. He said, we don't have anything better to say, anything else to call it. So I said, all right, we'll do that. And so I started writing things. He started writing things up on our blog. And we were both listening to like Wing TV and a little bit of Alex Jones. And when I heard, I think Viz was on Wing TV, and then I found...
Which one was Wing TV? Was that the guy Victor Thorne?
Victor Thorne, yeah.
Right, who died in 2016, right? Or supposedly...
Yeah, around that 2015,
It was during the election, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. So,
did you ever hear of his story? Wasn't he in Pennsylvania or something like that? I think he said, if I ever get suicided, the Clintons killed me, right? Didn't he say something like that? Yeah.
So, right, the minute that happened, people were talking about the Clintons doing it. And actually I used his books on Hillary. He had 3 series of books on the Clintons.
Right.
The sex, drugs, and murder volumes.
Right. So he had done a lot of research on that.
Yeah. And so I was listening. It stood for World Independent something, Wing D. I can't even World Independent News Group or something.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So that's how I heard Viz, and then I started listening to Viz's shows, and I remember telling Andy, I said, "Wow, this guy's a really good interviewer." I thought he was one of the better ones, because I think I'd listened to. It turned out Viz didn't like this guy Greg Szymanski.
Yeah, I know Greg Szymanski. I remember.
Yeah. And I don't think Viz liked him. I think he was an okay interviewer, but when I heard Viz, I was like, wow, this guy's really good. So I think what happened is we must have put a link to one of the shows on our site. And then I saw in the comments, he asked us if we wanted to be on the show. And I told Andy, I said, Andy, like, this Visigoth, he put a comment here. I think he wants us to be on the show. And that's kind of how that started. And so I would still do presentations, and sometimes we talk about them. So I have to say, in the beginning, like, I was pretty naive. I thought it's just people just didn't know this stuff, and once they know it, like, something's going to happen. So that I really did feel that way in the beginning, and I thought, well, if we can do something local, get on shows, then other people, because I didn't think you could necessarily get it nationally, but you could do something local. And if other people did something local, that's the way we can get this out there. And
Right.
it was, I say, it was all new to me. And I really did believe like I was going to change things. I went at it whole hog,
Right.
And then 2015, I think it's around Viz got off. And not only that, remember Victor Thorne, he had some issues too, but it's funny when I did, so, after he got into 9/11, I still see things through a 9/11 lens, but of course 9/11 led to a whole mess of other things, and including Arkansas and the Clintons and the Oklahoma City bombing, the Kennedy assassination, which I wasn't really that into the Kennedy assassination. I think I kind of thought he was killed by someone other than Oswald, but I didn't really pay that much. I didn't give it too much mind, really a lot of attention. And so I say it just led to other things. And that's how I got into the Clintons and you realize pretty quick that there's the Republican Democrat thing doesn't matter, and I don't even look that this doesn't even factor into my mind now. I couldn't care less, I don't even think about that.
Right.
But so that's how it went, and like I say, then so that was going on for quite a while. Around 2015, not only Victor Thorne passed away. When I ordered one of his books, I was going to be on a show because Bill Clinton was coming into town. So I thought, well, if Bill Clinton's coming into Utica, I thought, why don't I'm going to see if I can get on a local station and talk about him and all the drugs going on in Mena. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny. One of the guys that the first presentation I did was in a local college because it was a friend of Andy's got me on it, and I did okay, not that great. It was my first time, and that guy who put that on, it was part of a whole mess of other things this guy was putting on at the college. He was like a really lefty guy, but he had all these things going on at the college, and one of them was he wanted me to do 9/11. So when Clinton came into town, I went on the radio, and this guy actually got arrested for going to he spoke at this I think it was called the Stanley Theater in Utica, and Clinton spoke, and this guy called him a war criminal and everything, and he got arrested. He had more guts than I did. I went on the radio, he got arrested.
Gotcha. So
that's how I had studied a bit on Mena, and then I didn't really get it. The guy who had me on, his producer, I had done something on 9/11 before, and his producer, he was young, but he's kind of an old soul type, and he got me back on. So I knew I could ask anytime I wanted to get on the show. I could talk about Clinton and Arkansas, and then I also did a show. I didn't really feel like I was able to completely present what I wanted because it was kind of contentious, which was good. You don't want to just preach it converted. Actually, two of the guys that were on his show ended up agreeing with me, like the producer and this other guy. And then I also did a show at a local college radio show on this. And then just recently, what brought this upon was I put up a link to Billy Jack Haynes, the wrestler, talking about being one of the witnesses to the Boys on the Tracks. And your producer Booker, he saw that. I guess he must be a wrestling fan, and that's how we got in contact.
Interesting. So I don't know about that story. I don't even know much about wrestling, but when did he come forward and say that? Because that event happened back in the 80s, right. Early 80s, maybe. Yeah.
That happened in 87.
87. Yeah.
He just came in. I think he said it a few years ago, maybe even 2016, but it kind of brought it back a little bit. And even a year ago, he talked about it. And on the wrestling show, Hannibal TV, the guy called a private investigator out there just recently did a show. So it at least kind of brought it back a little. Well, we'll get into that, the next show, but how and see, whether he really was a witness, who knows? Why he would say, but why would he say it if he wasn't? I'm not sure. But at least it it kind of brings it back again. And it, like I say, it is important because some of the same people, of course, the Clintons, William Barr comes up in this. They're still around. And I think William Faulkner said past history isn't dead. It's not even past.
It's not even past, right? That's true. Yeah.
So it really does. It really shows. It shows where we live is not where we think we live. Everything we've been told about America is just not true. And
the Boys on the Tracks, for people who don't know, were two young men who were out late at night. They supposedly, the cover story was that they smoked marijuana and lied down on the tracks and were run over by a train. But I think it was on an independent autopsy showed that they had been stabbed. If my memory
stabbed,
beat up.
One was stabbed, and one had his skull crashed, caved in.
Right. So it looks like somebody had done that and then laid them on the tracks. And it's just been a story that's been around for decades now, really. I mean, one of the authors was Mara Leverett, who wrote a terrible book about the West Memphis Three, in my opinion.
Oh, and, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Mara Leverett.
Yeah. Book on that.
Yeah, no, because Mara Leverett is, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's kind of somewhat ties into that strange Arkansas world. You know, that was West Memphis.
Right.
So
I was going to bring that up to you. I didn't realize she wrote something on it because I was wondering if it. I mean, you wrote Abomination, and I was wondering. I was in Arkansas, and I was wondering if there's any ties to it in some fashion.
Well, that's the tie because she's still kind of
right.
A cheerleader for these three guys who were convicted and were almost done with probation next year. They've never vindicated themselves in a court of law. They're still guilty at law. And she said the most bizarre things in public that you just drop your jaw if you know the case, because, and they found something in Damien Echols' storage locker. He let it go and didn't pay up for it. Guy bought it and found that he had an advanced copy of Devil's Knot, his storage locker. So it looked like, in my opinion, it looked like he was in communication with her before she published the book. And the guy who bought the storage locker said that there was a receipt in there from an attorney, and it looks like the attorney, I haven't seen the receipt, this is all what he told me, but that the attorney actually went through the book to see if there was anything incriminating and make sure that there was nothing incriminating. So it's not an objective book at all. It's not a third-party book. And sorry. No, but it's just strange to have these weird things. Arkansas is a very strange place. You know, there's a lot of things that went down in Little Rock. It was Bill Clinton, if people don't know, his parentage is not known. The person who they said who is his dad is not his dad. Blythe could not have been his dad.
Right.
He was in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And of course, one of the theories is Bill Clinton is really an illegitimate Rockefeller.
Right, because they're one of the Rockefellers used to spend time down there, right?
Yep. Winthrop Rockefeller, and but it's funny when you're talking about this Mara Leverett? Is that her name?
Mara Leverett,
okay.
M-A-R.
Mara Leverett. I mean, that seems to be par for the course. You see her write a book on the Boys on the Tracks, and you're like, wow, this is maybe someone saying something, and then they go and they disappoint you with something else. Like, this just seems to be par for the course on these type of things,
Dude, she left out really important points, which are the 500-page psych record made by two different hospitals, one in Arkansas and one in Oregon, about Damien Echols, who was kind of the ringleader. He was 18-year-old. He was older than the other two. And they left out the post-conviction confessions of Jesse Miskelly. There's no mention of that in either book. I got to go back and verify the post-conviction confessions, but when you get one, you'd get a totally different skew. And I think it's unfortunate because, it's too bad because that movie was optioned. There was a movie about it. The book was optioned, excuse me. There was a movie about it. And so that's what people have is this book of record. And it's off the charts, man. Yeah, so Arkansas is a strange place. Bill Clinton's a strange person, When George Bush Sr. died, here's a picture of him in his hospital room as he's passing away, within the days of his death. Why is Bill Clinton there? Isn't he his political adversary?
Yeah.
right?
Well, of course, their campaign managers got married when they were running against each other for president. So,
Right. Yeah. So, it's
you
just,
know,
oh boy.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, it gets
yeah,
stranger
and
and stranger. And so then Bush is tied up to Mena, as you probably already know as well.
yeah, that's for sure. Well, I mean, the Iran-Contra affair. It was Edwin Meese who I believe, coined the term Iran-Contra. And there's a book by Terry Reid who was involved in the goings on in MENA, at least as far as the manufacturing of weapons and training of the pilots. And according to him, I forgot what I was saying. What was I saying?
Was it the pilots? Who was the famous pilot who was the well-known pilot who was shipping stuff into Mena? What was his name? He ended up getting.
That was Barry Seal.
Barry Seal, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so I forgot where I was going with
That's
that. I was going to do that at least once because there's so many.
There's so many. There's all these guys. Dan Lasser. There's all kinds of. You can get into the Arkansas Redevelopment Fund. There's all kinds of money laundering. Just so dirty.
So basically, yeah. Okay, I know. So the Iran-Contra was coined by Edwin Meese, and in the book they talk about William Barr saying even to call it Iran-Contra was a bit of a diversion. Although the Iran-Contra affair is officially considered a diversion of profits from weapon sales from Iran to weapons to the Contras.
Right.
That's kind of what it's called. That's the official version of what it is. And William Barr, who's now the Attorney General, and he was a big part of the Iran-Contra affair. His code name was Bob Johnson, and even he was dressing down Clinton in the thing I'll get to, because they were taking a little bit too much for themselves doing things, and he said that I think he even said that's a diversion as well, to just to keep it as Iran-Contra is not giving it, obviously.
It's not seeing the full broader picture, right? I mean, there's a lot more going on, right?
Right. So maybe they thought, okay,
let's label it this. This is a limited hangout, right?
Right.
Let's call it this.
We can get around this.
Right.
But we don't want to bring up the drugs. We don't want to bring up Arkansas. We don't want to. So the Iran-Contra is, even to call it Iran-Contra feels like that's their term and they're leading you a certain way already.
Right.
But right. But again, the Iran-Contra was a diversion to the Contras. And I'm sure your listeners know the Contras were the Somoza loyalists who were overthrown by the communist Sandinistas.
Right.
And that's how the whole idea that we can't have communists down in Central America and we have to fund the Sandinistas. We have to fund the Somoza loyalists, the Contras, to get that back in because we can't be free if we have communists down in Central America. Of course, they're still there, and somehow we're free. So,
yeah, how'd that work out?
Yeah, so if I said we weren't free, and they said, "What are you talking about?" Well, the Sandinistas are still in power out there. But so anyway, so MENA is basically about what happened there was. Let's see, it's hard to which one to start with. Probably the easiest they had weapons manufacturing going on down there. We'll start with what they did was they brought the CIA brought a firm called Ivor Johnson, which apparently goes back to the Revolutionary War.
Interesting. I've never heard that term. Yeah.
I
never heard of Ivor Johnson. Honestly, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, well, I guess they got quite a heritage, So they relocated them from New Jersey down to Arkansas, and then they had started manufacturing weapons for the Contras there. And then they had another, the name escapes me, but they had another company that was converting the semi-automatics that Ivor Johnson was making into automatics. And then they were doing things without we're not putting serial numbers, so they're untraceable. So that was one part of it, obviously the weapons. The other part of it and now it's just funny. Now, have you heard of Seth Ward? Another Arkansas. He's another Arkansas businessman that when Terry Reid, who wrote the book Compromise, as part of the Iran-Contra, part of the MENA. Well, he was part of the piloting and the manufacturing because he was a manufacturing expert. So when he wrote, he was part of that. He was as a pilot. He had a business with Seth Ward in Arkansas. So that's how he got involved in Arkansas, because they had an ultralight plane business. So that's how he got involved with Seth Ward. And then Seth Ward was Webster Hubbell's father-in-law.
Wow.
And Webster Hubbell was part of the Rose Law Firm.
Rose Law Firm, right.
So yeah, they're all going to tie in. So you've got the weapons with that, which then you've got of course the drugs.
Right.
And that, I think now, of course, that ties in with Barry Seal, who was here's a funny thing about Barry Seal. I don't know if you know that. Have you heard of Daniel Hopsicker?
Yes, of course. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Very well, yeah.
Well, I
Barry and the Boys, right? Wasn't that his book?
Yes.
Barry and the Boys, yeah.
Right. And I think it's right on the cover. He's got a 1963 photograph in Mexico City of Barry Seal with Frank Sturgis, Felix Rodriguez, who was part of the Iran-Contra affair, part of the Phoenix Project, part of the Bay of Pigs. He's a Bush loyalist from way back.
Was it Felix Rodriguez that killed Che Guevara? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess he cut his hands off as well.
Yeah, he still wears Che Guevara's watch on his wrist. Yeah, so.
And they're not sure if he cut his hands off before or after he killed him. Wow. Yeah. And then Porter Goss is also in the picture.
Right.
And I don't know if Porter Goss, when I first got into 9/11, Porter Goss was the head of the CIA at that time.
Right.
So I knew that name, and it turned out that Porter Goss was also on the House Select Committee of Intelligence, and he talked about he was also a congressman in Florida, of course.
Right. So it just all goes back. It's all interwoven all the way back,
right.
Even that far back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Barry Seal again, I guess these guys were part of assassination team called Operation 40. So Barry Seal goes way back. They had their eye on this guy like from the beginning, and he also was in 1972. He was like TWA's youngest pilot, and he was smuggling weapons for the anti-Castro Cubans.
Right.
So
he's networked with that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes way back. He's obviously like mobbed up like right from the beginning. Now it's funny though, and I know you probably mentioned this on a show I was listening to, is how like nothing ever really happens to Cuba. They can never. I think Johnny Carucci's talked like they can never seem to assassinate Castro.
Right.
It just happens to be a Jesuit Catholic country.
Yes, very strange indeed. That he's not very powerful. Nothing next to the U.S.'s potency, but it's very strange. I think something happened because of Kennedy that people became gun shy after '63. After November 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what dissuaded. Like, look at what it's come to. And I read a really interesting book about the assassination. I actually had the guy on my show. His name was McPherson, was the author of a book about the assassination of Letelier, the first person really assassinated in D.C. And it was all these anti-Castro Cubans who were super violent in those years, 60s and 70s. So these guys are hanging out with these operators who were very angry, who got kicked out of their country and were violent. Lots of weapons.
Yeah.
Lots of illicit means of getting funding as well.
Well, according to Terry Reid, one of the guys I'll get into that, but when they were training the pilots, one of the guys that they brought in from Cuba that was training the pilots in Anella airstrip that was like 10 miles away from Mena. He was a Cuban exile that shot down or brought down a plane in Cuba, and he was one of the guys training the Contras in Arkansas. And there was also, now this would be a matter of public record, a guy named Emil Camp was also another guy that was training the Contra pilots in Arkansas. Well, he like ran out of fuel and like ran into a mountain. And they think this guy that was training the Contras, he had a code name. I don't know his name, but he's the guy that like killed these a Cuban flight. So yeah, we're talking about like real violent people that they're getting involved with. It's crazy.
No, really crazy era. I think the guy who I talked to, McPherson, who I think is a professor in North Carolina, he said that the most terrorist actions and bombings were done by anti-Castro Cubans in the U.S. Tons of bombings and violence.
If you look at the Kennedy assassination, the anti-Castro Cubans come up a lot, and I think that memo by J. Edgar Hoover about a George Bush coming to after the assassination of Mr. George Bush from the CIA came to ask me about the anti-Castro Cubans.
Right, like he already knows about them all, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I don't.
He just wants to see what Edgar Hoover knows.
Yeah, and I think that might have been Hoover's little blackmail, kind of fingering George Bush for being involved in the Kennedy assassination, possibly.
Oh, he wasn't actually in Dallas. He was in Tyler, Texas, which is about 15 miles from Dallas.
Yeah, right. You keep getting a friend of mine he works with a guy that as a Kennedy assassination guy, and he asked him, he goes, "Well, how long you been studying this?" He said 30 years. He's like, 30 years? And he goes, yeah, it leads to a lot of other things.
Right. It's so true.
It's not that he was slow. It's not that he's stupid. It really does tie into a whole bunch of other things.
No question. Anyway.
And like I was saying about Barry Seal. So Barry Seal, it was Oliver North. Terry Reid had been in Vietnam and in the secret war in Laos. And he did some things for the FBI and the CIA a little bit, like with the Toshiba, who were like he was involved in like Toshiba machinery or something that manufacturing that was stealing something from the U.S. and giving it to the KGB. So he had some a spy background, and Oliver North knew him. His code name was Kathy at that time, John Kathy, I believe. And so Oliver North had been trying to recruit Terry Reid, and when he got into Arkansas with Seth Ward, that's how he got more involved with that. But so Barry Seal, and then it was Oliver North that hooked up Terry Reid with Barry Seal. So
Gotcha.
And Barry Seal was, of course, Frank Sturgis, part of the Kennedy assassination. I'm not a huge Kennedy guy. I don't know all the details, but I know there was a lot going on with Oswald and New Orleans. And, of course, Barry Seal is from Louisiana.
Right, so he's in that area.
So, yeah, it kind of ties in. So, like I was saying, Barry Seal definitely goes deep. And so according to what I'm reading, he wanted to get things started in Louisiana, but he ended up going to Mena in, 1982. And Mena was like the right spot because it was out of the way. It was very rural, especially where Mena was up in the mountains. It was a very difficult area to get to. It was a small town. It was very rural, and you had Clinton, who was like the perfect guy. Terry Reid, what they call Arkansas, is a banana republic.
Right, it's kind of it was a one-party state there, right? I mean, back in the day, Democratic controlled.
Right, it was really controlled by, I guess, a guy named Jackson Stevens was like the kingmaker down there.
Gotcha, and he was kind of a financial guy with tons of money. Yeah.
He's kind of like the Rockefeller, I think, of Arkansas.
Right, I remember that.
Oil, utilities, banking. I guess he's got the biggest investment firm west of Wall Street. So.
Do you know who else came out of Arkansas at that time, supposedly in oil? Jerry Jones. You know who Jerry Jones is?
No, I'm not sure who that
Jerry
one is.
Jones owns the Cowboys.
Okay.
He came right out of Jackson State, that whole era, right around Clinton. Somehow had tons of money, enough to buy a sports team in Dallas. Pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah, you can't. You just keep the rabbit hole. It never stops.
No,
you start researching this. You
see
never run
where
out
that
of
money
things.
comes from. You know,
Yeah.
you got to launder that cash. You got to put it somewhere.
Yeah. So Arkansas was like the perfect state. It was its own little banana republic. Clinton had he had pretty much he got the people he wanted in the as far as the judges. He had his dirty cops. They pretty much owned that state, and it was just it was third world. It's a very poor area.
Right.
It's mountain in the terrain. When they were training the pilots, the terrain was very similar to Nicaragua. So it was just and then you had Jackson Stevens, you had Dan Lassiter, you had, and then they started the ADFA, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, specifically to launder money from the CIA, because they couldn't pay the people that were making the weapons. They couldn't pay them. It was illegal under the Bolin Amendment. It was you couldn't finance the whole reason it was illegal, because they made it illegal to finance the Contras. So obviously they couldn't pay them. But so what they did was they started that ADFA, and they were also laundering a lot of money through Dan Lassiter, who was also a bond broker, and Worth and Bank and First Bank of Mena, which were owned by Jackson Stevens. So you couldn't they couldn't pay like Ivers Johnson outright. So what they did is they gave loans to the companies they had to pay through the bond fund.
Right, that's right.
So in other words, it was all.
So that was the laundering device to do all that stuff.
Yes, yeah. Between Dan Lassiter and the ADFA and, like I said, Worth and Bank, First Mena Bank, you can launder. They had the people. Oh, Jackson Stevens also apparently helped bring the BCCI into the United States.
I wasn't aware of that. Wow. Bank of
Yeah.
Commerce and Credit International, the most
Or the
corrupt bank in human history.
Yeah. The Banks of Crooks and Criminals International.
Right.
So everything was in place in Arkansas. It was a banana republic, but it had people with the banks and the bond expertise to launder the money.
Yeah, and Clinton, before he was governor, he was the attorney general, right?
Attorney General, yes.
Yeah, like 26, 28.
Mm-hmm. And then, according to Victor Thorne, when he became governor, he got a little bit too far. After his first term, he was voted out by Frank White, I believe.
Oh, right.
And they say he might have really won that election, but they took it from him because he was getting a little too big for his britches, according to them, and they had to. He wasn't the king. He was just he was the puppet, but I think he thought he was a little bit more than he was, and they had to bring him in line, and then he won the next term. But so Tyson Chicken, Don Tyson of Tyson Chickens is another big name down there.
Right. Yeah.
And one of his associates, of course, Hillary made her money that $1,000 into $100,000 in commodities.
Right. Wasn't it like a cattle futures or something like that?
Yeah. So that ties in with Tyson Chickens.
Wow.
So all these things, if you just think of Arkansas as a banana republic, and the CIA is, like, as Terry recalled, was renting Arkansas. That's why so much of it, like you say before, when we were talking before, Arkansas wasn't the only place, but it was probably where most of it for a few years was going on, especially the drugs with Barry Seal and possibly even Don Tyson as well. So there was a lot going on with Barry Seal. And what happens, Barry Seal now a lot of people think that they always talk about the government, like it's just the government, but there's various departments of the government. So they don't tell everybody that Barry Seal is doing these things for us till it comes up. And so Barry Seal got arrested by, I think in Miami, by the DEA there. But what they did in '84 was, when he got arrested, then they made him a DEA informant.
So Seal was a DEA informant?
Yes, they made him in 1984. So once they made him a DEA informant, because people in Arkansas knew there were drug drops going on. They knew there were things going on. But once they made him informant, they said he's working for the DEA, so they couldn't pursue it as well as they wanted to. You know, they would just say, hands off, he's our boy now. So I think that was, once he got arrested, that was their way of protecting him from anything else, because they didn't go tell everybody at first that he was working for the CIA and that he was doing things down in Mena, and until people started making a fuss. And then, like I say, I don't think the government they don't tell everybody everything. It's not one organization. It's a conglomerate. So if the DEA in Florida doesn't know what's going on and they arrest him, but they don't want to blow his cover for what was going on in Mena, then they made him an informant. So it was then it became hands off on Barry Seal, because they knew what was going on down there, but they couldn't get to him because they know once he became a DEA informant. And then what he did was he was taking drugs down and taking drugs back, but then he spied on the Sandinistas. He got drugs from the Sandinistas. And what happened was he's got pictures. I don't know if Barry Seal was in the pictures, but he took the pictures, and Reagan, wanting to get support, saying, oh, the Sandinistas will stoop to anything. You know, he's got the Sandinistas like transporting drugs into his plane on his pictures, and Reagan went and exposed, you know, put that up on TV and exposed, and then he just blew Barry Seal's cover.
Interesting, right?
Yeah, so that made him now he's becoming a liability, but he's still, so now when he blew his cover, and I'm not sure what year he did that, but so it made Barry Seal expendable, and that could have been part of the whole thing. And then he got arrested again from Louisiana, and then he went. What he did, he thought he was going to get out of that one, but what they did was the judge from Louisiana ordered him to stay from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in a halfway house in Louisiana, in a halfway house with the Salvation Army. Now, when Reagan exposed his cover, as far as the Sandinistas, the Medellin cartel put a $500,000 purse on his head. So what this judge did is it was known where Barry Seal was going to be.
Right. So it basically signaled it, right?
Right. And so his lawyer said, well, you just put a death sentence on him. And of course, that's what happened. Right.
So then all these supposed guys from South America came in and shot him, right?
Right. Now, there's a book called The Conspirators by Al Martin. It's The Conspirators, Secrets of an Iran-Contra Insider. And Al Martin was more involved in the financial end. According to him, the Iran-Contra wasn't just not just about drugs, and that it was tied up with all this fraud and all these shell corporations and all this sort of thing. Well, according to Al Martin, the guys that shot Barry Seal were employees of Southern Air Transport, which was a CIA front company.
Yeah, it's always been, it's like a notorious.
Right. Okay, so he said their record was scrubbed, but according to Al Martin, he had some information on it, and that's really where these guys came from. In other words, it really wasn't the Medellin cartel that killed him. And Al Martin says that William Casey gave the word to liquidate Barry Seal.
Interesting.
And also, according to Terry Reid, Barry Seal was blackmailing Bush, which was apparently he got some pictures from the KGB. But Barry Seal used a lot. He blackmailed a lot of people, including Edwin Meese, with dirty money, so it could be traced. But Barry Seal told Terry Reid that he had something on Bush's sons as far as getting involved in the drug trade. So Barry Seal was a dead man. No matter how no matter how you look at it, the guy, he got in a little bit over his head, and I think he thought he could do better than he did. Barry Seal always thought he could handle the handlers. and
It turned out not to be true. I mean, didn't he
right.
have tons of money? He was trying to always invest his money, right? I thought that he always had problems like trying to figure out where to put his cash.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that's in the. Did you see American Made with Tom Cruise?
Yeah, I don't remember it very well, but
Yeah,
I
part of
definitely.
that and I'm granted it's Hollywood, but he was having trouble with all the money he had. He had he had he was doing drop offs. A lot of it was going to Dan Lasseter to launder for him. And if anybody doesn't, Dan Lasseter was another bond broker, and he was really good friends with Bill Clinton. And Roger Clinton was his chauffeur. And when Roger Clinton got busted, Dan Lasseter got busted as well for cocaine and being a cocaine dealer. And he was given 3 years, but he only served 6 months. And 2 of those months were under house arrest. And he got pardoned by Clinton.
Wow.
So Dan Lasseter was another, they call them bond daddies. Dan Lasseter was, again, another part of the whole money laundering scheme.
Yeah, the lesser known kind of operator, yeah.
And I was doing some research on him, and he started getting his money. Do you remember the Ponderosa Steakhouses?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, they were pretty big up here when I first. I'm like kind of like a weird fussy eater, but when I first started eating steak, I used to go to Ponderosa Steakhouses. Well, Dan Lasseter started the Ponderosa Steakhouses. I guess that's how he started making his money, and then he got more into bonds and that sort of thing. But yeah, so like everybody Clinton was hanging around, his brother Lasseter, like doing a lot of drugs. I mean, it just seems to be around there a lot.
Yeah, well, that was the era. I mean, I think that was really a cocaine era. I don't know, maybe the 70s into the 80s. I don't think they knew the consequences as much.
Right. I think when I start getting to 9/11 and when I really understood it intellectually as far as the physics of the towers and all that, I got it. But I think when I realized, because I grew up I was in my 20s in the Reagan era, and I knew all the just say no. And when I realized, as I got a little bit older, okay, I knew people did drugs. Like I never did them, but I knew people that did them, and I knew they didn't have any problem getting them. Like, so when I realized the drug war was phony,
right,
and then that just really hit me, and I was like, oh my God, what else is fake then? Like they made such a big deal about that, and then it turns out that they're dealing drugs, and that was the one I think that, and that's why I gravitate towards this, because there's so much, especially with the money laundering. Like they can't. The CIA and drugs go way back, and I think to me more than anything, the hypocrisy on that just blew me away at first.
Yeah, it's incredible hypocrisy, because a lot of those guys knew what was going on, and they're making tons of money, tons of untraceable cash.
Mm-hmm. But it's the money laundering where I think you can always get these guys. And also another part of MENA is people knew what was going on, and there was an agent named William Duncan. He was an IRS agent, and at the same time there was an Arkansas state investigator named Russell Welch. They ended up coming together because Russell Welch was on the ground hearing things about drugs going on and that sort of thing, and William Duncan found through the ADFA, he found all the money laundering that was going on through there.
Oh, interesting.
So they got together, and I think in '86 they tried to go through get a federal grand jury they had like a 3,000 page report that they compiled with indictments and all, and bankers, witnesses saying they saw money laundering. They would see people like making deposits at all different tellers at the same time. So they did all sorts of things.
Oh, my gosh.
They knew this was going on. And what happened was they stymied the investigations at the federal and the state level. So they got, William Barr, Terry Reid quotes when they had this thing. What happened was Clinton was taking too much, And William Barr had to dress him down. Clinton wasn't supposed to be at this meeting, but he showed up, and William Barr kind of dressed him down for taking a little bit more than they should have, because the state was supposed to. It's the feds. It's the feds. It's the Iran-Contra affair. It's the feds that are doing this, and the state is allowing to do them. They're getting money for it, but they're taking too much. But according to William Barr, that they knew about Duncan doing all the stuff. And so he said that what they did is they had to get a guy in place, and his name was let me think, I gotta think, Michael Fitz something. And I knew I had it, and Michael Fitzhugh. So he was the attorney that William Duncan presented his evidence to. And Fitzhugh said that William Duncan asked for more time. And William Duncan's on a video called the Mena Connection, and he categorically denies. He said, "Why would I want more time? Like, I had this ready to go. I want to present this evidence. Why can't I do it?" So this Fitzhugh was the guy that William Barr put into place to stymie the investigation at the federal level. And it took them 2 years later, they couldn't get it through. So what happened is Duncan and Welch, then they tried it at the state level. So Mena was in Polk County. So they went to the Polk County deputy prosecutor. His name was Charles Black. And they presented the evidence to him. So they went to Clinton. Now Clinton on the state level, they went to Clinton. And of course, the federal level, you got Bush, it was really the Iran-Contra affair is more Bush than it ever was Reagan. So they got their guy, they got their U.S. attorney in place to stop it at the federal level, and then Clinton stopped it at the state level. So this guy named Charles Black said, we don't have enough money in our county to prosecute what's going, to look into Mena. So Clinton apparently, he promised him $25,000, which he never got. And then they also had a U.S. the Arkansas Attorney General. His name is Asa Hutchinson.
Yes, and he became governor later, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he is right now, I believe.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, I think he's like on the second term. So they went to Russell Welch and William Duncan tried it on the state level. They had this 3,000 pages of files, and Asa Hutchinson said there's not enough evidence here.
Right.
So they stymied it on that level. And the Arkansas citizens started an Arkansas committee because they knew of all these people lived it. They saw all these low flying planes and these drug drops and people knew what was going on. They formed a committee and they went to Clinton, and Clinton did nothing again for them as well. So you had it locked up. And but again, Arkansanians or whatever, they seem to have forgotten about what all these things Asa Hutchinson did, and they voted him as governor twice now, I believe. But
the amount of money, people were speculating the amount of money that was coming through that trade wasn't in the millions, it was in the billions.
It was in the billions, yeah. Up to $3 to $5 billion worth of cocaine was going in there.
Just incredible stuff.
It's insane. So you couldn't hide all that stuff. Not only could you, the logistics of people had to come in and drop these drugs.
It was like a military operation that had to involve hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, if not thousands, right? Of all different types. You've got the operators, movers, flyers, drivers, distributors, bankers, lawyers, politicians. Everybody's in on it. Everybody, a lot of them may not have a choice, frankly. If you want to survive there, take a little money. It's like the old thing, plomo or plata, right? Silver or lead. Anyway, we are at 55 minutes, Herb. Do you want to lay a little bit of a groundwork for what you want to talk about Mena on our next show? A little.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we'll talk about Kevin Ives and Don Henry, who are known as the boys on the tracks, that were at the wrong place at the wrong time and ran into a drug drop. That was in 1987. Now, Bear Seal was murdered in 1986. So in other words, this was still going on. Even documents show that even up to at least up to 91, the operations were still going on. Now, one thing I didn't mention was the weapons manufacturing that was called Center Rose was the code name for that, and Jada Bridge was the pilot training. The pilot training had been dropped, but the weapons manufacturing actually went to Mexico. And that was the meeting with Clinton. He wasn't too happy about that because he was losing money. But their weapons manufacturing went to Mexico. But it appears that even though that went to Mexico and Seal was murdered, the drug shipment still went on. Apparently, even at least up till 91, it was still going on. Anyway, so during the drug drop, the boys on the tracks, they were murdered, and which definitely murdered, like you mentioned. And there were also other MENA-related deaths as well. So we'll talk about that. And what's brought this in the news a little bit, at least on the internet a little bit, is a wrestler named Billy Jack Haynes, who came forward a few years ago and said he was there when those boys got murdered. So we'll talk about
cover that as well. Cool. So we'll cover the boys on the tracks. Billy Haynes, you said?
Billy Jack Haynes. And there's also other people that got murdered in relation to the boys getting murdered as well.
Right, and there's a lot of strange deaths around there too. A lot of state troopers and people who knew too much, people who spoke out. It was very dark. So anyway, we can cover that. Again, it's Herb Smith, and we just covered kind of an introduction into the MENA drug trafficking operation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, cool. All right.
Do you video game till your thumbs hurt? Binge till your eyes burn? Guess what? You're a speed freak. You need Fios 500 meg internet by Frontier. It's just $39.99 a month plus taxes and fees with a 1-year price guarantee on service fee and no annual commitment. Let us guide the speed freak in you. Visit frontier.com/speed for complete offer details. Frontier. Don't go it alone. Limited time offer, speed not guaranteed. Depends on many factors. Install equipment fees, surcharges, taxes, and other fees are subject to change. Frontier terms and conditions apply. Subject to availability.